Hi everybody, my name is Cara Rencken. I have been a member at Emmanuel Church for a number of years, and I'm also a volunteer member at the Durban North or North Durban Victim Support Team. We operate out of Durban North, and we do a lot of trauma debriefing with our community, ranging on all sorts of things, but obviously never anything quite on this scale. I am also a wife and mother of 3, and we did also experience quite an intense armed robbery a few years back, which I will be drawing on that just for a bit of an example from time to time. There are 2 videos that we're going to be putting together. The one is how to help us deal with trauma. Obviously, with the events of the last week and a half, 2 weeks, this is something that we've received a lot of questions about. And the second video we're going to do is about helping our children cope with trauma. As a parent, there are lots of things that you can do to help your children work through trauma, and we'll be focusing on that. There are 3 things that I'm going to look at with regards to this. The first is experiencing trauma, the second is coping with trauma, and the third is recovering from trauma, because there is definite things that you can do to work your way through the trauma. As far as experiencing trauma goes, everybody that goes through something traumatic will experience some post-traumatic stress symptoms. It is normal. You are not losing your mind. It is 100% normal. That looks different for different people. Some people will experience very few symptoms, some might experience more, but the rule of thumb really when it comes to experiencing post-traumatic stress symptoms is that the first 3 to 4 weeks after traumatic events, anything that you experience is 100% normal. So that's something to just bear in mind when you are experiencing these symptoms. There are 4 main categories of symptoms that we will experience, and I'm going to just run through those so that you have an idea of what is normal. People can experience trauma either by actually being in a situation where they've experienced trauma firsthand, or it can be perceived, or it can even be traumatizing to learn about things that have happened. So just because you weren't there on the front lines does not mean that your trauma is irrelevant. It is real if it's real for you. Okay, the first category is psychological symptoms. With psychological symptoms, it's usually in the form of flashbacks or dreams or persistent memories that you just can't shake. You keep on reliving or rethinking something that has happened. Very normal. Many people experience that. The second main thing that you will find is that you will have either physical or psychological reactions to either internal, external cues or triggers. And the third thing that people often find with psychological symptoms is that you then have avoidance tactics that you use to try and avoid the thing that is triggering you. So it could be internal avoidance measures where you are trying to not think about what happened, or to think about your feelings regarding what has happened, or external avoidance measures where you will try to physically avoid a place or certain people. The second category of symptoms is emotional symptoms. You often find that there are 2 extremes when it comes to emotional symptoms. You will either have like a heightened or exaggerated negative mood, so you might find that you're in a persistent state of anger or fear or anxiety, or you could be on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is where you are feeling quite numb and muted, where you don't have an ability to feel positive about anything, no matter what it is that's happening. Either end of the scale is normal under these circumstances. And remember that anything that you are experiencing is a very normal response to what has happened. Incidentally, men and women often experience fear or stress. It comes out in a different way. For men, they often find that they are more angry, not always, but very often. And women often find that they are more irritable. Again, not always, but very often. Okay, your third category is physical symptoms, and that would be disturbances in things like your sleep. It's very common for people to feel very tired during the day, feel like they need to sleep during the day, and then nighttime comes and they just can't switch their brain off and they can't go to sleep. Very common. Changes in your appetite or your energy levels, also very common. Many people directly after something has happened will express that they feel extreme fatigue, which is very normal. So your body has had a rush of adrenaline, and that adrenaline is now working its way out of your system, and it really can leave you feeling dog-tired the next day. Totally normal. And it happens to many, many people. Hypervigilance is also a physical symptom after trauma. You might be always worried for a door might slam and you notice it. Or, for example, myself, it had been a few days and I was trying to get a nap in the middle of the day because we'd been out patrolling that night. And I was convinced that I could hear gunshots. And so I got up out of bed and I listened by my window, couldn't hear anything, went outside onto my patio, still trying to hear, and I could just hear the doof, doof. And I was convinced that I was hearing gunshots. Turns out it was actually just my neighbor's child jumping on a hard piece of plastic, and because they are still quite little, they couldn't get the 2 feet at exactly the same time, but that sound, for me, sounded like gunshot in that moment. Very normal. Another thing that people often do is, like I explained, the slamming of a door is an exaggerated startle reflex, very common. Some people experience pain. When we had our armed robbery, obviously with my training, I didn't have a lot of the symptoms that come with trauma, but the one thing that I did have was chest pain. I didn't think I was stressed. I didn't feel stressed. I really thought I was coping quite well. There was nothing else that I could tell that was bothering me, but I did experience chest pain. Now, that's very common. You've got to remember that trauma stores up in your body, in your cells, actually, and so it's not uncommon to experience some sort of pain. After these last 2 weeks, I have developed a great big lump on the side of my eye. No idea why. I'm feeling fine with every other respect, but for it to come out in your body is a very normal thing. Another symptom is cognitive symptoms. You get something called dissociative amnesia, which is where you will forget certain elements of what happened. During our robbery, I was focused on my children because they were all home with us. I was focused on my children and the dogs going crazy, and that's what I heard, that's what I was focusing on. My husband, who was trying to focus on what was being said because he speaks Zulu, did not hear the children or the dogs. He did not hear our youngest child screaming the entire way through it. And it's not because he's an uncaring father and it didn't bother him. It was just because your brain has so much information coming in that it actually can't process everything at the same time. So dissociative amnesia is where you will forget certain things. You might not remember the events of what happened exactly, or you might feel like there's parts of your day that were blacked out. Totally normal. It's your brain's response. It's your brain's way of protecting you from too much information. Another thing that's very common is something called depersonalization or derealization, and that is where you feel like you are not yourself. You feel almost as though you are watching yourself go through your daily routine, but from an outside perspective, watching everything that's happening. You almost feel like you are having an out-of-body experience, for want of a better phrase. Very normal. Derealization is where you feel like the things around you are not actually real, like you're sitting in this chair, but what is this chair in fact? Or you're looking out at the view, the trees around your house, but you almost feel like what you are living in is not real. Also a very common symptom. Inability to concentrate is also very common. I know my husband experienced that on his first day back at work. He really just couldn't, and I've heard a lot of men in particular actually report this one symptom where they felt like they were fine in other regards but weren't able to concentrate sufficiently. Very normal. The last cognitive symptom is a persistent negative belief, which is something that you really want to work at resolving. And that is where you will say nothing is safe anymore, or the whole country is unsafe, or there's nothing that we can trust, there's nothing that we can do, we are helpless. It's a very common cognitive symptom of trauma. Okay, we're going to look at coping with trauma. There are 5 things that I've written down. This is not an exhaustive list, the same as the previous one, experiencing trauma. It's not an exhaustive list. It's just some things that I find really helpful when we're out dealing with people. The first thing that you need to know when you are coping with trauma is that you are not crazy. It is a very, very normal response that you are having to a very abnormal circumstance. It's not every day that we live through something like this, or a car accident, or losing a loved one, or experiencing an armed robbery. Those type of things are not normal everyday occurrences, and so your trauma response is a very, very normal response to a very abnormal circumstance. The second thing that you need to look at when it comes to coping with trauma is that you need to sleep. Sleep plays such a key role in coping with anything. Like I said earlier, you will have disturbances in your sleep patterns, so you might find that you are sleeping during the day or very tired during the day, but they're not able to sleep at night. One of the main reasons is because your brain is like a computer, and so it's got all of this information whirling through. The way I describe it often is like you've got 27 apps open on your phone, and if you were like me until a few years ago and your children showed you, you don't know how to switch those things off. So it's draining your battery to have all of those apps running at the same time. And that's often why people are not able to sleep at night, is because their brain is working 24/7 trying to solve this problem. So to make sure that you do sleep, there are certain things that you can do. If you are not taking sleeping tablets under the care of a doctor, you don't necessarily want to start that now. What you can do is take 2 antihistamines, Allergex, Rhinatin, doesn't really matter. There are no serious side effects other than waking up with a really clear nose, but it will help you to just nod off to sleep. If you want to go a more natural route, you can look at increasing your magnesium and your zinc levels at night. 500 milligrams of magnesium and 25 milligrams of zinc taken at the same time just before bed will help you with your sleep. Or you could be doing something like taking some Biral or Stress Away, or other people use Rescue, anything like that, just to help you sleep. Sleep is very key to helping yourself get through this. The third point in coping with trauma is help. It is so important to help. Help in any way that you need to, whether you need to be out there on patrol, whether you are better at manning a coffee station or putting food hampers together, or checking on your neighbors to make sure that they're fine. You need to do what you need to do to help in that situation. I tried doing other stuff, but on day number 2 for me, I needed to go out on patrol with my husband. That was my version of helping. It's what I needed to do to help cope with the stress that I was feeling with the event. So help, give. The best way to give to yourself is to give of yourself. Give your time, give your resources, give your expertise. In helping and giving, those are 2 big things that you can do to help cope with trauma. My fourth point on coping with trauma is focus on what did happen, not what might have happened. That's really a big one. If you're in a big car accident, it's natural to think, oh my gosh, what if I had died? What would my children have done? What would my husband have done? It's very normal for you to think of the very end ramifications of something like that. So it's not strange that you are going down that rabbit hole. But one key element in coping with trauma is pulling yourself back up that rabbit hole. Don't go down the rabbit hole of what might have happened. Focus on what did happen. What did happen is that we had a big upset and a whole lot of civil unrest in KZN. What did happen is that you are fine. What did happen is that we got food and we got petrol and the community rallied together. Focus on what did happen rather than what might have happened. Lastly, when it comes to coping with trauma, do the things that you normally do to find some balance and peace in your life. For some people, it is gardening. I find that really helps alleviate stress in my own life. Do the things that you normally do, such as praying or possibly reading your Bible. Take a walk, stretch, exercise. Remember I said that stress literally gets stored up in your body, so taking 10 minutes out of your day to stretch before bedtime is a really good way to help and work that out of your body. Walk your dogs, hug your cats. Cats are great therapy animals. Hug anybody that you can, in fact. If you are on medication, Do not stop taking your medication. Make sure that you do not forget. You'll have a lot on your mind. You might forget. That's not going to help anything. Set an alarm if you have to. Do not stop taking your medication. In fact, if you are on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, it's a very good idea to get hold of your doctor and ask them if you should be increasing your dosage or not. Don't do it by yourself. Make sure that you have spoken to your doctor. But this is a very big upset, and it might be that the normal dose that you are on is not sufficient to deal with what it is that you are going through. I'm now going to look at recovering from trauma. There are 5 things on my list. It's very attainable, and with working through this, that post-traumatic growth, which I'll speak about lastly, is definitely our goal. The first is that your brain is going to stop thinking about this when it is done thinking about it. There is no shortcut to it. Processing trauma, your brain, like I said, is like a computer. It is designed to solve problems, and so it will think about this over and over again. It's almost like a Rubik's Cube. It turns it over and turns it over and turns it over, trying to figure out what could you have done better, what could society have done better, how could we have avoided this on the particular day, should I have done my grocery shopping the day before, should I have done it? It will just turn it over and over and over, trying to solve this problem. There's no shortcut to it. You are not going crazy. Like I said before, just work your way through it. Allow yourself the time and space to think about it as much as you need to think about it, because once you are done thinking about it, your brain will stop thinking about it. And while you are thinking about it, focus on strengths, focus on solutions, look at what worked well, look at what the society we live in did in response, look at the communities that we live in and what they did in response. Focus on the strengths and the solutions that were found both inside your home and outside in society. The second thing when it comes to recovering from trauma is that you need to talk about it. Whenever I'm on a case, I use the analogy of my handbag. It's not a very big handbag, but nobody knows what's inside your handbag until you start unpacking it. And it's the same as what's going on inside your mind. You don't know what is inside somebody else's mind until they start unpacking it. And when it comes to speaking about your trauma, it's almost like taking your handbag and emptying things out and putting it all out on the table and looking at what is there. You might group some things together. You might realize that there's an old tissue or an old receipt that's there that you actually don't need, that you can crumple up and throw away. And it's exactly the same when it comes to dealing with trauma. You will take out what you're feeling. In fact, the first time that you deal with it, you might literally empty your handbag upside down and just let everything fall out onto the table. That is totally normal. There's a word for this. It's called narrative therapy. When you talk about things, you're expressing it. And each time that you unpack what has happened, speak about what has happened, you then land up repacking your handbag in a slightly different order to what you unpacked it. And that unpacking and repacking is so key when it comes to working through your trauma. My third point on recovering from trauma is be kind. Be kind to everybody, everywhere. Be kind to the person walking past you in the street. Be kind to the person who is serving you behind the counter. Be kind to your neighbors. Be kind to your children. Be kind. Kindness makes such a big difference. It also helps you to focus on things outside of yourself. I walked into our local shopping center the other day, and the lady who was there spraying our hand sanitizing, she had a very distant look on her face, and I thought, I know that look. And so I stopped what I was doing, and I looked straight at her and I said, are you okay? It doesn't cost you anything to stop and check in with people to make sure they're okay. You don't know what people's experiences have been this last week. And so be kind to everybody, not just the people around you or in your family. Be kind. My fourth point on recovering from trauma is be generous. Like I said earlier, give of your time, give of your expertise. The best way to give to yourself is to give of yourself. Give to the community, give to strangers. Be generous. My last point under recovering from trauma is something called post-traumatic growth. There have been studies that have been done looking at people who have gone through trauma and yet not just coped with it, but recovered and thrived from it. And this is called post-traumatic growth. In these studies, they found a significant degree of positive change in things like a person's priorities, in their experience and appreciation of everyday things around them, of life in general, and also in their future dealing with difficulties. People reported being able to deal with these difficulties better. Our goal is post-traumatic growth, is not a society where we walk around still dealing with this trauma for years to come, but it is to work through this and not just cope with it, but to thrive out of it. And lastly, my final point is let God in. This has not taken him by surprise. It may have taken a whole lot of us by surprise, but it has not taken us by surprise. Just a small little tiny example. I went into work today and I said to my boss, for no reason other than Jesus lined me up to do this, the Saturday before all of this went down, I thought, I've got a bit of time. I think I should do all the work that I was going to do on Monday today. There is no logical reason why I did that, other than God knew what was coming and he decided to free up my week so that I could focus on other things. This did not take God by surprise. You may have a lot of questions around it. You may even have some emotions towards what has happened that you're not sure how to deal with, but let God in. There are people around. We've got our community here at Emmanuel Church that are willing and ready to help you walk through this.